My name is Jesse Muniu from Petropal. Petropal is a technology provider for the industry. We have a digital loyalty, we have digital training, we have smart metering for LPG, bulk and cylinders. We also have e-commerce, and finally we have a forecourt management solution. And all these solutions are being used by different players in the industry. I'll introduce my colleagues who are joining me for this very important discussion, Fueling the Future, Opportunities in Kenya and Beyond. I'm joined by Engineer Edward. Group CEO for Trinity Energy, and finally Warren, who's the CEO for Africa E-Mobility Network. But because everyone now has a mic, I'll give Edward just 30 seconds to give us a brief description of what EPRA does for the ones who don't know.
Thank you, Jesse. So good afternoon once again. So I've been doing technical and economic regulation at EPRA for the last 15 years. We are actually formed through Acts of Parliament. We had previously been formed under the Electric Power Act of 1997, where we had the Electricity Regulatory Board, which later on transitioned to the Energy Regulatory Commission in 2006, when the mandate of mid and downstream petroleum was added to us. Then somewhere in 2019, we have the Energy Act 2019 and the Petroleum Act 2019, which now has added us another mandate for regulating upstream. So in the petroleum subsector, we are doing technical and economic regulation of upstream, midstream, and downstream. We also do regulate the electrical energy, generation, transmission, distribution, and then we also regulate renewable energy. So in a nutshell, that is us. We do formulate regulations, we do licensing, and we do enforcement. Thank you.
Ken?
Okay. Thank you, Jesse. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, just before I go into my introductory remarks, I want to really appreciate John for this great initiative. This is a wonderful event. Well done, and keep this trajectory. I have the privilege of speaking right after my regulator, so I'll be very measured in what I say. But I'm very, very happy to be here. My name is Ken Mugambi. I'm the Group CEO for Trinity Energy. Trinity Energy is, we call ourselves a Pan-African integrated energy company. Why that? Our roots are in South Sudan, but now we are spreading across East and Central Africa. We have presence obviously in Kenya. We are now in DRC. We are soon setting up in Tanzania, Zambia, and Uganda. We're in power generation. We're in obviously downstream retailing and distribution of petroleum products. We are probably the only company across this whole room that trades crude oil. So we buy and sell South Sudanese crude oil, and we sell that in the international markets. Our ambition is to get into the upstream space, basically the oil and gas exploration space in South Sudan, and we are chasing a few prospects around that. And yeah, we feel very, very privileged to have an opportunity to tell our story in this event. Thank you very much, Jesse.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Jesse. I'd like to actually join Ken in my praise to all the work that John Jonko has done. Honestly, I've been observing this for quite some time. It's been, what, 6 months preparation to this. And honestly, John, everybody, I'm very, very privileged to be here. And thank you so much for the wonderful work you've done here. Absolutely. Just joining everybody here in the industry, absolutely a privilege. And I hope everybody feels that today. So my name is Michael Mazurewicz. It's a Polish surname, so I actually feel extremely privileged that Mr. Adrian Leszek before said a few words about the country of my origin. Actually, to be very honest, it's not really my country. It's my father's country or my parents' country. I was born in South Africa, but I do feel still very much Polish. I do speak Polish, if anybody's wondering. So yes, I think that's important that if you come from a certain country, you still speak the language. I hope that's also a lot of the Kenyans that are in the United States don't forget to speak their languages as well. That's how it was. So I'm the business development director for Motorgas. Motorgas being actually a very new company, a very young company, in existence for 2 years. But our experience is born out of 80 years of being in Kenya and understanding and analyzing the industry here in Kenya in terms of the mobility sector. So we actually started as an automotive company, training mechanics, building up the mobility sector here in Kenya. And then little that we knew that we started realizing that there's a massive opportunity to grow in terms of new alternative fuels. Our story is really a story of listening to our clients, fleet managers, all the companies that actually own many, many vehicles, and listening into their pain, understanding that they are struggling with the high costs today. Obviously, we live in a very interesting, dynamic world. Prices are changing. Nothing stays constant. I really like the slogan that Mr. Adrian Leszek gave, that the only thing that is constant in life is change, right? I believe I got that right. And that's how we see it. Everything keeps changing. We have new technologies, new alternative fuels coming in. And right now, Kenya is at the forefront of a very exciting change in the next 3 to 5 years. So hopefully we'll be one of the main leaders, the frontier leaders in this change. Thank you.
Once again, John, thanks very much for putting this together. Just a round of applause for John and the leadership that he's really pushed at POAC. This is an appreciation about expanding the conversation beyond petroleum. And I like the inclusion of not just autogas, but also EV. Where the world is going today, the technology shift has already started. We are transitioning from the current set of fuels that we have and embracing a new set of technologies in LPGs and now in electric mobility. As you've seen, there was a vehicle, Hyundai Kona, out there. It's really a signal that today in this conference, it's only one. But maybe in the next couple of years, you'll start seeing part of this exhibition panel, this exhibition area, with a charger. And someone else bring a motorcycle, and someone else bring a payment solution for charging. And all this is bound to happen, but it's part of a longer-term transition. And that's the conversation we'll be having today. My name is Warren from the Africa E-Mobility Alliance. We're a think tank focused on promoting awareness and adoption of e-mobility on the continent. We advise business and political leaders on making e-mobility accessible to the common person in Africa. And I'm very excited to be part of this discussion today.
Thank you, thank you. I don't know whether you've noticed the way they have sat. So on my right, we have the government. And on the left, you have petroleum or dirty fuels. And then you have the bridge fuel, which is LPG, CNG. And finally, you have EVs. So there's some ground rules. It's a conversation, so there are no hard questions. My panelists can chip in and chime in, whichever word you prefer. And I think we'll start with the government, of course. You know, you have to be cognizant, How is Kenya in East Africa preparing for the future of fueling? in particular, the global transition from petroleum to EVs.
Thanks again, Jesse. In terms of our mandates, that's where I'll start. One of our greatest mandates is to ensure that we develop guidelines to ensure implementation of ratified conventions and treaties. And you're all aware that some people met somewhere in Paris in 2015. And of course, there was a resolution that was done that we need to guard against increasing our temperature, the global rise in temperature above the 2 degrees, the pre-industrial age. And having signed that convention on 28th of December 2016, I think we are bound by it as Kenyans. So one of the things we are doing as a regulator is to ensure that whatever innovation comes to decarbonize the current fuel mix we have, we openly welcome that. For example, if you look at the generation space, there's a time we were doing 30% thermal generation. Today, I think it's less than 10%. 92% of our grid is green, more so after we discovered geothermal energy. And those are the kind of innovations that we don't have to close our eyes to. We have to welcome them. Back home, 2018, I got Mr. Janusz visiting me and telling me there's something called autogas. And all my technical guys ran away. And I remember one lawyer who has since left the organization. He asked them a very simple question. If in the 1900s you told somebody they would be carrying 40 liters of gasoline in a vehicle, they would think you are mad, because gasoline is even more dangerous than this LPG we are talking about. So it's on that point we said, why can't we do a pilot? And 2018, there it is. We started the first pilot. Of course, I slept with my heart in my mouth every day because I didn't know what to expect. Previously, I'd seen an autogas vehicle somewhere in 2011 when I joined EPRA. I joined EPRA in 2010. There's a gentleman who had come with a Subaru. He'd converted his engine to the use of gas. Interesting is the way he was placing his storage for gas. It was a normal cylinder put in the boot. So when he steps on the brakes, the cylinder goes this side. And I thought that was not very safe. But when we called Janusz and his team, they did a technical presentation. Of course, very hard questions were asked. And after assessment, we said we can do pilot. And I think that marked the beginning of the autogas industry in Kenya, to the point that the Association of Kenyan Insurance had refused to insure those vehicles. But I was clever enough to put cabs in this mix. So you had to get a no objection. Your prototype had to be checked by Kenya Bureau of Standards. And once they test your prototype and they are okay, then basically it meant that you are safe. And that's how AKI came to license this kind of technology. Yes, we have allowed autogas. We now have standards for autogas. We are doing regulations. We have again allowed EVs. I think we also allowed it on a pilot basis. We had to do even benchmarking. Now the stations we have, I think there are 2 or 3 stations now which are hybrid with EVs, autogas and everything. But we're also allowing a lot of innovation as a country. In East Africa, we work with our sister regulators. We are members of the Energy Regulators of East Africa. For a long time, we've been the chairman. So this is the EAC member states. And a lot of our standards are now harmonized standards. The LPG standards are harmonized. And we're looking forward even to harmonizing, like now the standards we have for alternative fuels. We've also worked on guidelines, for example, for ethanol blending. You remember we had a regulation on gas oil. We used to call it a gas oil regulation, where you are to blend some percentage of ethanol with gasoline. But that happened in 2010 after the global energy crisis in 2008. But when prices dropped, people left it. But now, having signed the Paris Agreement, it is coming back. So what we've done is that we've developed a regulation, a draft regulation, which is basically on biofuels. It's on bioethanol and biogas. So we are looking at you blending ethanol with gasoline. You get an E10 or an E5 blend. And then we also have blending of biofuel with diesel, where we have the B5 or the B10. So these are some of the measures that we put in place to ensure that this carbon dioxide that we produce from the exhaust of vehicles, we are able to reduce it so that we can be able to balance the greenhouse gas effect. I'll be speaking more on the other innovations that we've done, but I think that is what I have now for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any quick thoughts? Ken? Or
Maybe just a few words here. Just to commend really EPRA on actually the whole journey from the beginning, because obviously we remember those early steps. 2019 was the first car converted or upgraded. I'll explain the difference of that later on. So really, you know, we're 2025 now, so the journey's only been 6 years. But what I really want to say is, if there's something that I really want to point out, is Kenyans are remarkably entrepreneurial. And the only support that most entrepreneurs in Kenya always want from EPRA is just to make sure that the safety standards are there. That's it, really. I will be one of those guys. If there was a petition just to up the budget for EPRA, I'm going to be one of the first people to sign that. Because honestly, the work that you do, I think the only challenges that we usually have is time. You know, we are all in the business space, so we want to move fast. We want to move now. We want to open up the stations right now. We can't wait for you. So yeah, I think it's very important for us to have this open discussion so that we can all work together towards making sure that we can empower and actually up the budget for EPRA to be able to do the job correctly. So yeah, thank you so much for that. Yeah.
Probably could just add on to, you know, you need to compliment the government, especially when you, on a lighter note though. But I think, just to add on to what Michael has said, I think the regulatory framework in East Africa, to be honest, has been ahead of the pack compared to a lot of other jurisdictions in this continent. And largely from, obviously, the push that EPRA has done. I believe East Africa was probably, if not the first region, and you can correct me, Kenya, we were the first ones to adopt the 50 ppm diesel. You've now had Kenya talk about, you know, the blending, the bioethanol. I think for me, and probably I'm preempting a little bit about what I was going to say later, in a region like ours where, you know, even fuel access is still a challenge. Even before we talk about transition and all these great conversations that my friends on this side are going to have, petroleum fuel is going to continue playing a critical part in our energy mix. And I think what the regulator has done in terms of working on the emissions is really a step in the right direction. As we move towards transition, which is going to come absolutely, let us focus on managing emissions, even as we expect to scale up petroleum consumption as our economies expand and become more complex. So well done to EPRA.
Yeah, EPRA has done a great job. I'm not political like Ken. I'm moderator, so I'm neutral. But I think there's always a balance between managing innovation and you know, sort of like delaying innovation by putting in policies that you know, create barriers to entry to you know, new innovation. So my question is, how do you strike a balance between? Because I hear you've already put out regulation for even products that are not in the market, like bioethanol. Bioethanol is actually there, but you know, I know you're doing a lot more in advance before some products are actually already in the market or become mainstream. How do you strike a balance between doing that and allowing innovation to come in, and then then later you sort of like put safeguards.
Thank you, Jesse. I think it's a very tricky situation. It's like when the Americans put the first man in the moon. Who knew what was in the moon? Those men would have gone and never come back. So ours is like a chicken and egg situation, whereby you know the dangers that are posed by the products that we do regulate, and you know, like for example, I'll give you a very good example. I think it was around 2020 or thereabout. Somebody came to EPRA's office with an innovation that they have an electronically controlled valve which you can buy gas by use of tokens, and everybody went berserk. They asked a question, we know gas is highly flammable. This meter is using some motherboard, and when you have a motherboard, you have a current. Is it safe? And the guy had to go a long hog. He even brought tests that was done at Columbia University. Our KEBS itself looked at it, and I think they didn't have capability to test that meter. But looking at it from the tests that had been done, of course, we say, let's give it a trial. So whatever innovation comes, sometimes it's moving out ourselves from the comfort zone. We know we are introducing things that traditionally we've been told that electronics and fuel, they do not mix. But of course, we know the world is working on R&D for a long time, and they know, for example, today we can put a pump inside fuel, a submersible pump, and it is safe. So what we have done, sometimes we take a guess, or we kind of assume it is a chance that let's try. If something wrong does not happen, then, but if something wrong happens, then you see my face in Parliament answering questions how that technology was allowed before it was properly proven. And of course, these are things that people fear a lot, but I think the world is changing, and we cannot live in the past. So the world is moving forward. So we know that somewhere in at the early of 19th century, somebody said that they had a dream that one day you would be talking to a mobile gadget as you walked. And people looked at them and said maybe they were mad, because that time is where you had wires all over and you are using the traditional phone. I still believe somebody still said that time that we'll have a time where electricity will be transmitted through induction. So I'm still living for the Gen Zs to actualize that dream, so that electricity jumps from one place to the other. Maybe it will happen one day. So let's not close doors to innovation. It's just to assess the risk. You do a risk assessment, and then when the pilot is done, collect as much data as possible. And if that data tells you that it can be done, roll it out on a bigger scale, and that's how you get to change a country. Thank you.
Ken, I know your business operates across East Africa, and I guess, Kenya, of course, being the front runner, we are having this discussion about transition, but it's not the same case when you go to, the country of your company's origin, South Sudan, and probably DRC. So what opportunities are you seeing in the market for the traditional fuels and as well transition fuels within the region that you're operating in?
Okay, thank you once again, Jesse. As you've rightly mentioned, we operate in both probably a more developed market like Kenya, and probably a market that is a little bit behind like South Sudan. I mean, to give you some context, South Sudan has less than 5% electricity access. Kenya is probably, regulator is here, but over 80% electricity access. So that should give you sort of a context in terms of the difference between these markets. So for South Sudan, a conversation around energy transition, auto gas, EVs is way out. I'm not saying that it's probably 10, 15 years out, but it's still some years away. So our focus in these markets is really around providing energy access. And one of our key mantras as an organization is really to bridge energy access. That's our primary focus. And transition then comes after we've provided access. So we are approaching these markets differently. In South Sudan, our primary focus, as I've mentioned, is to drive energy access. And this will be through primarily traditional fuels, diesel, petrol. On power generation side, we are first generating power using thermal energy and then scaling that using solar, because you have to provide, the base load. And it's tough to provide base load with the intermittency of renewables. I mean, you've seen what has happened, I think a week ago in Spain and Portugal, because of over-reliance, obviously, on a renewable, not to take anything away from, obviously, renewables like wind and solar. But there's a place also for traditional fuels in providing grid stability. And that's the starting point for us in a market like South Sudan, ensuring there's access, there's stability in terms of energy availability, and then now starting to scale that through renewable and cleaner fuels. Now, when it comes to Kenya, we have to adapt because here things are moving faster, the market is more developed, it's more mature, and you'll find now we are moving into the autogas space. We have partnered with EV charging providers. We actually set up our first EV charging station last week. We have, yes, thank you. We have in the Rhino Charge, for those of you who know the Rhino Charge, which is actually going to be at the end of this month, again as a measure of our commitment really into this sustainability space and the energy transition. We have partnered and sponsored the very first EV Rhino Charge vehicle, and I think that's going to be monumental. And again, really speaking to where we see obviously the energy space moving in this country and beyond. So to your question, Jesse, we think there's opportunity and there's a place for all these fuels in the diversity of the markets that we operate in. And even in this market, it's not to say that Kenya as a market is fully mature to the point where we can fully think about EV and autogas without creating a space also for our traditional fuels to grow. I'm sure Kenya will confirm that there are many areas of this country that are still underserved when it comes to normal or traditional petroleum infrastructure. And these are areas that we are looking at in terms of innovations around fueling solutions that can be delivered optimally, and again remaining as key growth opportunities even within this market and other more mature markets. Yeah.
Thank you, Ken. I think a challenge to you, Michael, and as well, Warren, to sponsor an LPG and EV is already done. So
that's going to happen 100%. I'm actually a fan of Rhino Charge, so it's just a matter of time. We're going to have auto gas powered engines as well in there. Absolutely, and but we're going to go beyond that. We're going to go, actually, we have quite an interesting vision of getting into the rally space. Obviously, rally is, you could say, our national motorsport here in Kenya. Yeah. So obviously, we want to be the ones that provide the new solutions for that. Believe it or not, in Poland, we already have auto gas powered rally cars. So this has already been happening, and they're as good, if not better, in terms of performance than any other car. So that's definitely going to happen, and we're definitely on the right track here. Yeah.
I think we are very privileged to have you because you of course you come from Poland, and Poland has had a long history with autogas and LPG powered vehicles. I think 30 years, is it?
Yeah,
and I guess for Kenya it's only been recently that we've started getting autogas. I would want to hear your sentiments about the journey that Poland took to get to where they are today, and what, as Kenya, we need to do to be able to get from 20 odd stations to 200 to 2,000.
That's a very good question. And to be honest, there's not one way of answering that. There's so many different ways of looking into that. So maybe just a little bit of history. In Poland, obviously the journey with LPG was actually born out of necessity. It is a security feature. It's about energy independence, it's about energy security. So for us, in Poland, diversification of the fuels was extremely important. Little so it happened that obviously LPG is cheaper, then it really caught on very quickly with the fleet companies. And exactly like you said, 30 years. So we have that privilege of observing how the LPG space, the CNG space, even the biofuel space, which is being very active right now in Eastern Europe, how all of that is evolving, and all of that is over a period of around 30 years. It's just a story we were talking about earlier, the first days of how it was almost incomprehensible for Kenyans to realize that you can actually drive a car on LPG. That was us in the early 90s. So in many ways, Kenya is privileged in the sense that we learn from the mistakes in terms of safety. That's also very important. So a lot of the solutions that we're bringing up forward here in Kenya are not solutions that are just coming out of nowhere. These are actually solutions that have been tried and tested for over 30 years. Safe, secure, and working very, very well. And we can see that because so far there's about anywhere between 13 to 15,000 vehicles in Kenya running on LPG, and absolutely no situation, no issues. And I think everybody by now has caught on. Jesse, you mentioned, what would it take for us to grow from around, right now we are probably around 19 or 20 stations. LPG only fuel stations. At the moment, I think the first, what's the company? Is it Astral on Red Hill? They were the first ones to have had LPG, diesel, and petroleum all in one station. I think that's going to happen a lot more. But we actually believe that the journey for LPG is going to be kind of different. We feel that the LPG journey is going to be more direct towards the fleet, towards the bigger cars, the trucks, the buses, the PSVs, the heavy long haulers. That is where LPG really comes in. With its high octane, with its much lower prices, it perfectly matches to that sort of segment of the industry. In Poland, it almost feels like everybody's running on LPG in Poland. That's not true. The adoption rate in Poland is around 16%, 1/6. So it's technically a very small percentage. But now that 16% is roughly around more than 3 million vehicles. So that's pretty much the same as all the vehicles that are right now running in Kenya. So that's how it changes. We see that the LPG has definitely worked very well for the long haulers, for the heavy duty guys. The cars that are running anywhere, let's say, lower than 70 kilometers a day, I don't know if there is a real economic incentive for them to actually convert to LPG, but we'll see. We'll see how this goes. This is why it's so exciting. At the same time, we are sort of the Harambeans, we are mobilizing the country to use new fuels and alternative fuels, and we're building the infrastructure. But on the other hand, we're really observers. We're just loving to see what's going on, the new technologies that are coming in, who's doing what and how, and it's actually very, very exciting. And I think Kenya, the 30 years, probably, if we pass 30 years with LPG, is probably going to look very similar to what we've experienced in Eastern Europe. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting journey for sure. Yeah.
Thank you. I think, of course, Ken has shared quite some number of opportunities in the traditional and alternative fuels in the region. And I would say especially petroleum, because he's talked about South Sudan, only having very little access to diesel, petrol, and even power. What are the opportunities that you see, Michael, for LPG? for the LPG sector, for, you know, for these investors or people in the industry?
In terms of, like, if you could just give me...
As the industry grows from where it is today and, you know, gets to sort of, you know, the 16% that we are having in Poland, what were the big opportunities that, you know, that nobody is looking at now, but, you know, having that foresight to, you know, that you can
outside of LPG or within LPG?
Within LPG,
okay.
autogas.
I mean, I think we as Motorgas we're not only focusing on LPG, we are very much proponents of alternative fuels. So we see every single fuel as a separate ecosystem. And all of these ecosystems drive each other. So for me, the way I'm analyzing and I'm looking into the data and I'm analyzing and seeing how the evolution of fuels is happening in Kenya, I see the LPG being a very, very important fuel for, you know, we've had earlier the Matatu Owners Association. And they are the ones that really are struggling the most in terms of making sure that they can actually be profitable at the end of that ride. It's extremely important. The only way they can actually build their business is either by upping the tickets or trying to find other savings. Now, obviously, that other savings is the better solution, right? So we see the heavy haulers, the long haulers, the PSVs, the trucks, and all of that, that's being a very, very important component. Right now, what has happened in the last 5 years, we've seen an absolute revolution in the taxi space in Nairobi. Uber drivers, little cab drivers, or whatever you want to call them. Honestly, I think there isn't a taxi driver right now that doesn't know about LPG and its benefits. It's just a matter of finances. If we can sort out the finances, and we are working on that to build the finances up for them, it's just a matter of time when most of the taxi drivers are going to be running on LPG. And of course, the next big step is going to be the PSVs and the trucks, the truck industry. So that's definitely the opportunity in that area. Yeah.
Conversions, you mean?
Conversions, yes. Okay, so maybe also something that I think is quite important for everybody to know, because there are two different LPG technologies available. So we have the petrol to LPG technology, and then we have the diesel to LPG technology. Now, the diesel to LPG technology is a relatively new one. It's a very complicated procedure. So it is something that is being introduced into Kenya very, very slowly. But with the petrol to LPG, what it is, it's what we call it is an upgrade. So we add components, we add a whole LPG system into a car, and it allows you to run on both fuels, on petrol and on LPG. Then we have the diesel to LPG, which actually is a full conversion of the cars. Now that is going to be the technology that is going to be the driving force for the PSVs, the trucking industry and so forth. So what that looks like is that we actually take out the engine, 3-4 days, we completely repurpose it to run on LPG. Now that technology is not a technology that we can go back. So it's going to be very interesting to observe and see how most of the companies are going to look into that into the future and see that, okay, that means they have to get rid of diesel. So it's going to be very interesting to see, you know, when is going to be that perfect timing that diesel is no longer going to be the fuel of the long haulers, and then LPG is going to start kicking in. So yeah, that's how we see it, that's how we observe it, and we'll see how this story unfolds.
Yeah, thank you. I think, Warren, there's a lot happening in renewables. I think Ken mentioned what happened recently in Spain and Portugal. Maybe just to explain to the ones who probably didn't know, there were blackouts, national blackouts in Spain and Portugal because of over-reliance on renewables. That's what they're saying. And as well, you know what has been happening in the US. Of course, Trump, you know, pulling out the US out of the Paris Convention. There's also what is happening commercially when it comes to EVs. China now eclipsing the US. And now, everyone is wondering which way EVs. Maybe you can give us your take.
Yeah, that's a lot to try and unpack all in one conversation. But what strikes me is just we have an Africa focus, but I'll try and zoom in on Kenya first. That today, with the current grid profile that we have, it's almost fully renewable. And the other thing, or the other component we're not seeing, from the EPRA Petroleum and Energy Statistics, is we have been experiencing some level of energy curtailment on the grid. That is from the power that's generated, especially during off-peak periods in the middle of the night, when industry is ramping down, when you're switching off your lights and going to bed. The geothermal plants are still running. But not all this power is equally demanded at that point because businesses are closed down. So what happens to that power? That happens every single night. That industry shut down. As long as we're not a 24-hour economy, we have capacity that is usually left untapped. So it becomes an immediate opportunity, and most of that energy is actually green because we are not firing up any coal plants or any thermal plants. This is pure geothermal power and maybe even wind power that's coming at night. So already there's a critical pressing need on our energy supply side that is not being met enough by the demand. And this is where vehicles that can take advantage of this power that's available during these off-peak periods become such a compelling case for electrification. Buses, for example, today in Nairobi, a bus averagely does about 250 kilometers in a day. Now the EVs that are in the city today, the electric buses, are doing just over that amount, actually around maybe 250 to 275. So these are buses that can operate a full day without requiring charging. Whether there's a blackout in the middle of the day, the buses will just keep going. And then they can take advantage of the power that's available during the night. That's why EPRA had even gone ahead and introduced the e-mobility tariff, which was exactly to address and start addressing the opportunities we have at night by using the off-peak tariffs. And these are tariffs that are more affordable, and the industry has really taken advantage of this opportunity. So electrification is definitely going to be an increasing opportunity. It's not a blanket application that today we're all going electric. No. There are important segments that we should start thinking about. When you open your Uber app and you want to order your trip away from this place, what are the options that you see? There's probably an electric border option on that. It's because these motorbikes are now operating within a radius of something like 50 to 75 kilometers around Nairobi. And they can comfortably do the trips because there's sufficient charging infrastructure or battery swapping infrastructure. These motorbikes are becoming affordable. And to your point, Michael, financing is what's going to allow traditional fuels to transition into the non-traditional ones or the alternative fuels. So EVs come as a packaged solution. It's not just about selling electricity. It comes with affordability of the asset, which is the vehicle. So models such as pay-as-you-drive for these buses, or pay-as-you-go, weekly, monthly, daily payments for the border riders, is what's allowing them to tap into this technology that's slightly more expensive compared to a traditional fossil fuel vehicle. But it definitely allows them to tap into much lower operating costs, because when you compare the cost of moving a kilometer on an electric motorbike compared to moving a kilometer on petrol, the costs can be anywhere in the region of 40 to 60% cheaper. So certain segments are going to become very critical and are already transitioning. And that's public, shared, and commercial transport. Your motorbikes, your buses, your matatus, And now I've even started seeing a transition in the taxi space. Because there was such a rapid adoption for the taxi guys, they're fully, these are commercially driven people who are doing their numbers every single day. How much are they spending per kilometer? And this is why LPG was such an attractive opportunity to transition these drivers to a low operating cost. There's a company called Ridance that's recently introduced 52 electric taxis. These are taxis that are doing 170 kilometers to the charge. Guess what an average taxi is doing a day? Maybe 200, maybe 250. So this guy just needs a top up in the course of the day to keep running the whole day. They're renting out for 2,400 a day, and they've all been leased out. What does that tell you about that space? So the opportunity here is not that it's going to be a dramatic shift, but it's certainly targeting certain critical segments. Further afield into areas and other less developed markets, I think it also comes down to what are the use cases that can be transitioned. Because if you look at any city or any town, there's probably a transportation company or a set of individuals that are transporting people point to point. There's someone that's taking around bread to the shops. There's someone with a security company that's doing around every evening. There's someone that is transporting goods between cities. And these are the smaller use cases that can simply be electrified. Why? Because it allows for the lower operating costs. Guess what's the smallest charging station you can have? You've been having them in your houses the whole time. And these are simply your sockets. E-bicycles, some e-motorcycle models, and even electric cars come with a home charging plug. So this is already, the infrastructure has been semi-laid out in our different commercial, residential, and industrial settings. The transition is going to happen. And I think the opportunity also for some of the bigger energy players, especially, whether in auto gas, whether in petroleum, it's to also start understanding which markets or which segments are actually moving the fastest, and is your infrastructure transition ready? Do you have sufficient power, or do you have sufficient space? The traditional fuel station is no longer going to accommodate enough EVs. Even if you're putting a charging station today, remember that fueling takes 3 minutes. Charging takes 40 minutes to an hour. So the moment you put in 5 chargers, you've locked that space when all the vehicles are parked there. So there has to be a shift in how the future of real estate for fueling is going to play out. Down the stairs, that's probably going to be your next charging station when your parking lots are converted into charging points. NCA, National Construction Authority, already proposed regulations to ensure that 5% of all public or commercial parking spaces have an EV charging station, just because of the duration that it takes compared to a traditional fuel station. So the final thoughts around opportunities and innovation is that the EV space today is not just about electrons and the energy that's dispensed. It's about the infrastructure that accommodates the energy to be dispensed. Electric mobility entails building out these vehicles, putting together the batteries, and that's some of the important developments that are happening in Kenya and in Africa. That today we're having assembly of electric motorcycles, buses are slowly being assembled locally, matatus will soon start seeing that. So there's more captured value in transitioning beyond energy and into the infrastructure. So soon there'll be assemblers of charging points that start cropping up in the country, and this increases the amount of job opportunities that can be captured locally. So remember, Kenya has traditionally been relying on used vehicle imports. 80%, 8 out of every 10 vehicles we have is imported used. This is value that was already captured in another market. So I think we also need to incorporate, as we're pushing for energy, we need to push for value addition that moves further upstream towards the infrastructure and the operating assets. My final comment is that it's important to take financing and innovation in financing as the next front to unlocking investment. EVs and even autogas and other technologies have to be understood differently by our financing ecosystem. Today's buses, electric buses, cost roughly $40,000 to $60,000 compared to a traditional fossil fuel bus that would cost maybe $35,000 to $45,000 for the same capacity of a bus. With creative financing, that's the only way you can actually separate the cost of the battery from the cost of the bus when you're selling it to the operator. And the operator is only paying a pay-as-you-drive fee, allowing them to tap without additional upfront cost, reduce their technology risk because they no longer own the battery, so it doesn't matter what happens to that battery. If upgrades happen, they will just be upgraded onto the bus. It allows this operator to focus on their core business, which is driving that bus and knowing their route. They don't need to think about this technology. The same thing could apply to the newer alternative technologies, that we should be taking away the risk, the technology risk from our users using innovative financing and then slowly building their capacity so that, number one, they understand the true benefit of this asset over a duration of time. The upfront cost is always going to be an orange or a red flag to the user. But when you tell them you're only paying exactly the same upfront, the same deposit between an ICE and an EV, then it becomes a no-brainer for them. So financing is going to play a critical role. And then policy change. I think the policies that we are putting in place have to be adaptive and anticipating of where technology is now going. Already from the tariff that has been put in for e-mobility in Kenya, there was a cap at 15,000 kilowatt hours or 15,000 units of power to access that tariff. But in several occasions, the bigger vehicles are now constantly surpassing that. So there's a need for ensuring that the regulatory environment adapts and can accommodate this sort of growth that's going to happen. Just a final.
Maybe that's enough. I think because of time, we'll ask one more question, and I'll probably just give an analogy first. So there are lots of things happening in East Africa. The first one is the digital revolution. I'm sure if you walk around the booths, you see a lot of digital and technology that is being introduced in the oil and gas space. The second thing, of course, is the transition, as we've talked about, moving from traditional fossil fuels to CNG and LPG to EVs. And finally, there is what they are calling the Scramble for Africa version 2, where there are lots of new finds for natural gas in Tanzania, DRC. There is of course the traditional petroleum drilled in Turkana, South Sudan, new finds in Uganda, as well in Tanzania. There's big dams being built for hydropower in Ethiopia, something coming up as well in DRC, in Tanzania. So my question is a quick fire to all the panelists before we move to the Q&A. If you were to start again in your career, or you are an investor, where would you put your money, or where would you start looking for a job? I know there are many students here and young professionals, and many of them are wondering where they would want to start looking for a job, or where they would want to align themselves. I know there are also many investors who are interested in opportunities in East Africa, and I guess the panel here, the distinguished panel here, are probably some of the best people to be able to advise you. Over to you, Engineer Edward.
It's a tough question, but I'll answer it in my own very honest way. My career background, I'm a mechanical engineer. And this one thing I've loved from childhood, which is a vehicle, not the electric one, but the one that is called ICE, internal combustion engine. So I was in a bit of mourning when I heard that by 2035, the ICEs will be banned. I am not sure that that promise will be kept. What I'm thinking is that the hydrocarbons will be here for quite a while because, yes, we have these alternative technologies, EVs, you have autogas. Autogas is part of hydrocarbons, still using the ICE technology. I think what we need to do, personally, I still look for work in my space. I'm an oil and gas man for many years. And they say when you are an oil and gas man, you remain one. I know my former boss, I found him sitting on my seat. He's worked for ESO for almost 30 years. Today, he's still doing oil and gas. So I think my life, I'll still be oil and gas. I think what we're looking at is we have this monster called climate change, and we are now trying to balance. If you look at a lot of oil and gas projects that are happening now, people are trying to achieve a net zero status. You produce carbon on this side, and what are you doing on the other side? So you involve yourselves in other projects, all within the production process. You employ technologies that will ensure that you reduce the carbon footprint. I think that is one of the best things we can try working on. I know ENI has achieved carbon zero status for an LNG project they are doing, I think, in Ivory Coast. I heard they've been able to achieve that. In our own oil and gas projects, when we have field development plans being submitted to us, one of the things we look at is the ESG. We have to look at the carbon footprint. Where is your power coming from? Are you burning crude oil like traditional oil producers were doing, or are you employing, like in Kenya, why not get that power from the grid, knowing that that power, most of it will be green? Even in the EV space, we're looking at, for example, when you are producing this electricity, where is it majorly coming from? Is it from thermal-fired power plants? Because when you produce using thermal power plants and you use that for mobility, that basically has a carbon footprint. So I think what we're looking at are more efficient technologies to ensure that even if we exploit our resources, because these resources are there, and I like the way the Honorable Minister in the Republic of Uganda says, we have to produce this oil because it is our resource, it's our time. Europe, America, and now China, they had their own time. And interestingly, during COVID, or when this Ukraine-Russian war came, natural gas supplies through Ukraine were shut off to Germany. What did they do? A lot of coal ships were loading from Durban, South Africa, headed to where? They had, so the energy needs would be there. We can only supplement them to make sure that we get that balance. And I think one of the other things we have to work on as people who are in the technology space, let's work on making the internal combustion engine more efficient. From my engineering studies, I was told it is only 30% coefficient. So you're wasting a lot of what you are burning in the cylinder in terms of heat. Is there a way you can use, and this is for the students here, is there a way we can increase the efficiency of that engine? You've seen even smaller engines. This is Suzuki, it's called Suzuki Alto. I rode in one and I was told it's 625 cc. That's a motorbike. But that thing is so nice. You can go shopping with it. So why invest in an engine of 4,000 cc when you can still use a 625 cc? So these are things we are looking at. But of course, even in our town spaces, we can invest more on transitioning maybe the transportation within town. We do CNG, we can do LPG, we can do EVs. But of course, for those other mobility or transport sectors, like for example, heavy commercial transport, transportation through ships, air transport, where we cannot easily transition, We can make it greener. I know we are working now with the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority on SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel. You know, E&I has been here. E&I has 2 castor oil pressing plants, one in Makueni, I believe the other one is in Mombasa, and they are basically pressing castor oil, getting that bio oil, exporting it, and they go process it, it becomes SAF. So these are, and that's why we are working on even having blends of fossil. So we are trying just to supplement, because fossil fuels is what has been proven for now, but we want to use it in a way that we also sustain this environment for future generation. Lastly, we were involved in a project which was run by UNDP in 2015. It was called GFEI, Global Fuel Economy Initiative. We were one of the countries chosen in Africa, together with Ethiopia. I think the other country was Malawi. There were 3 countries. Basically, we were looking at how can we increase the efficiency of the vehicles we have. Then they were looking at the aspect of emissions. And one of the things that came to the fore was the age of vehicles that we import here. We're importing vehicles which are 8 years, and a vehicle by the time it gets to 8 years, where you bring it here and you put a KD something, I think now it's KDT, psychologically thinking it's a new car. That car has run for 8 years. As opposed to a car that has run for a shorter period, like 1 to 5 years, which efficiency is still high, the emissions are lower, and those are things that, out of that study, that they were recommended. That can we reduce the age of vehicles that we are importing, and then basically we look at annual inspections. You go to railway station here, I don't know whether those matatus are still there. Sometimes you go there and you think they are roasting nyama choma, because those matatus, the exhaust is just black smoke. Do they go for annual maintenance? I think all annual inspection. And I know where our vehicles come from. If you look at the dash of your vehicle, they are all computerized. It will tell you that the person who had that vehicle in Japan had a certain mileage for annual inspection. When it shows you the red light, you just change it manually and say, next year, 2026. But I think that is a culture we need to employ so that we can reduce particulate matter in terms of pollution, and we can also reduce the amount of CO2 that we are getting into the atmosphere. Thank you.
Ken, which career would you take?
Thank you, Jesse. You know, I found myself in the oil and gas stroke energy space by chance. My aspiration was to be an investment banker, and that's the line I took in my university until I found myself in this space. But no regrets, no regrets. This is such a sweet spot. It's such an amazing time to be in East Africa at a time like this, where you have oil and gas developments. You have oil developments in Uganda, obviously South Sudan, Kenya. We hope now to start commercializing Lokicha. You've got natural gas in Tanzania and Mozambique. You've got big hydro projects in Ethiopia, in DRC, obviously geothermal and other renewables here in Kenya and elsewhere. So it's an amazing time to be in this space. Now, I'll probably, with hindsight, I'll probably pivot more into the natural gas space. I think natural gas is an amazing transition fuel. The emissions from natural gas are way less compared to, you know, diesel and petrol. But also, it's the amazing potential for industrialization that natural gas offers. Fertilizers, you know, plastics, and all these other things that, you know, natural gas can provide. But importantly also, natural gas can act as a significant source of base load for power generation. And particularly, you know, for countries that may not be as fortunate as Kenya to have, you know, the significant renewable energy that we have through geothermal, solar, and wind. Natural gas can be an important pivoting point to the renewable space, by providing a base load that is a lower emission compared to, for example, generating power using fuel oil. So, I mean, as someone who is passionate about energy, and as I said, I would still come back into this space, although I came into it by chance. Natural gas is a natural area to really look into, and I want to believe, I'm sure EPRA is here, that Kenya is also doing its part in terms of helping to commercialize the natural gas potential that this country has, similar to what our neighbors have done. But I just wanted also to, as I conclude, to agree with Kenya that, you know, the fossil fuels are not going to go anywhere anytime soon. Yes, I'm an advocate of fossil fuels because that's what puts food on my table, but they are not going anywhere anytime soon. That said, obviously, the transition is going to happen. The world is moving, and we cannot afford to isolate ourselves outside of what is happening. You've seen China leapfrog the automotive world in a span of 5 or so years with renewables, and that is going to be a major, with EVs, not renewables, and that is going to be a major disruptor into obviously the transportation space, which is a big consumer of carbon fuels. Thank you.
Well, Jesse, I have to say that you've really opened up a river here of a conversation, because I find myself in the camps of natural gas. Obviously, personally, I'm going to tell everybody right now, when you look into affordability, cost, taking safety into consideration, and taking the investment and the return on investment, all of that together, absolutely, by not even by a small margin, by a large margin, it's LPG and CNG at the moment, by a mile. And I'm taking everything into consideration. Edward said something very interesting, actually, hydrocarbons. I honestly, I started my journey being a Formula One enthusiast. In another life, I would have been beating Lando Norris on a Grand Prix. But what we see from Formula One and from the motorsport is actually the real integration of all the engineering skills. So, you know, you ask the question of how would I advise a young Kenyan and what they should do? Don't think, just get into engineering. Just get yourself into engineering. Doesn't matter what, mechanical, electrical, doesn't matter. Engineering is the only way forward. We live in very interesting times, you know. Sooner or later, eventually, sooner or later, importation of petroleum is not going to be needed for us on our continent. We have more than enough resources. The only element that was always missing was that technical gap that was needed for us to be able to utilize and make the internal combustion engine, for instance, more efficient. Is ICE dead? Not by a long shot. Not even by a long shot. Even when you consider hydrocarbons, that's also a market that can be grown from different ways. You're talking about green hydrogen, you're talking about gray hydrogen from gas. So it's all spinning. So really, we're living in an interesting world where we're going to have simultaneously many different ecosystems running at the same time, and all of them fueling each other, and in many ways competing with each other for the good of being better and more efficient. And that's going to be exciting. It's going to be like a technical race. And I really, for me, you know, if I want to answer that question, there's so many ways of answering that question. But diversification of fuels is absolutely number one. It's the most important. We cannot go with one or the other. We have to stay secure, and we have to make sure that we are maintaining a good cost of the transition. Now, balanced transition is another very important aspect. Sooner or later, everybody will start realizing that the electricity, the hydrogen, traditional petroleum, all of it is interlinked. And it's really that balance of the interlinking. And right now, we're actually living in a very interesting space, because I'm sure everybody already is well in the world of using ChatGPT, AI. We have AI engines which are so unbelievably powerful. By the way, they use a lot of electricity, so if we're going to start charging all the cars, where is all the electricity going to go in terms of powering the AI? That's another good big question to ask, I suppose. But right now with the use of AI, we can actually mold all the knowledge of the engineering in a much faster way and speed up that transition. I feel that there's also another aspect that we didn't really talk about. I just wanted to throw it in there just in case maybe somebody was thinking of getting there. How AI is changing. In fleet management, AI is doing remarkable. You can still be running your fleet on petrol. With the use of AI, you can still save maybe up to 20–25% of your fuel. Just utilizing and analyzing telemetric data with the help of AI. Those are the technologies that are right now coming out, mainly out of USA at the moment, but this has already been discussed. So it's really an exciting world. And I think just keep it short, diversification of fuel is absolutely the only way forward. A balanced transition, having that technical and engineering understanding of what fuels what and how that can move forward. Yeah, with the use of AI, and as long as we can do it with safety in mind, thanks to APRA, then we're good and we can move forward. Yeah.
So it's curiosity for me. If I was to redo this again, I think I would just hope to have been a bit more curious. I'm a trained chemical and process engineer. And it's because of curiosity that I thought to think about where are we heading as a country, as a continent. Where do we get our energy from and where should we be taking it to? I did my time at Kenya Pipeline Corporation. I've worked in the agricultural space, and it's this space that is now the most curious for me. I don't know what's next because I've already started dabbling with AI, with different financial tools, with creativity, with content creation. It's to stay curious, keep tasting, keep feeling, because technology is just moving so fast. Today, people are using their cars to power the grid. Today, there's a motorcycle company that allows you to take your battery, take it to your home, and plug it in, and simply use that battery to watch your television. Today, the same battery, once it's not able to run on a motorcycle, you take it to a different company, they take it apart, they make you 300 solar lanterns that you can go to sell to the kiosk mamas. So the opportunities are endless as long as you're able to retain your curiosity. Taste. Be in the oil and gas industry. Get into auto gas. Try out EVs. It's all in your benefit to spend a bit of time, feel what actually resonates with you. Because I think each one of us has an important role to build the Africa that we want. Whether it's through the different types of fuels that we are pushing, whether it's through financing, whether it's through media and communication, I think it's to recognize exactly where do you fit into this human fabric that we all are. So my final thought is, this world today, as technology develops so fast, we can only differentiate ourselves and authenticity by being our truest, most vulnerable, most communicative selves. It's only by exploring our deepest curiosities that we are actually going to realize what truly resonates with us. Whether that's not just pushing fuels, but it's enabling someone to move from point A to B, enabling a shopkeeper to keep their lights on, enabling a business to actually supply internet to you. I think we need to expand our mind to think about what is that core value or core essence of our being. And that's only through curiosity and tasting things. All right, thank you.
What a way to end the discussion. And I think this discussion could have continued for a couple of hours, but I guess because of time, we have to stop at that point. Now we can take a few questions, hopefully not too many, but we'll try and answer all your questions. I can see one gentleman, two gentlemen with their hands up. I need help to pass the mic. So we'll take 2 questions at a time. So we'll do 3 times, so those are 6 questions. It's already 5, so I guess we can't stay here until 7. So,
I think this one's not working. I'm not sure.
yeah, most of the mics are off, unfortunately.
One, two.
Jack?
Thank you very much. And actually, first, my name is Jack Mudomi. I'm in the company of very good people. Congrats on Anjogu for organizing this. Congrats the panelists, and the topics were extremely relevant and spot on. Engineer Kenywa, you have not said that you are an order of golden warrior, and that is where I want my question to start, because the first time that I interacted with you way back when you are new in ERC that time, actually you lived to your billing of allowing the first container petrol station to be put at the showground during the SK show. If you remember, you might not have remembered, but fast forward, let me go straight to the question. We are talking about oil and gas transiting to EVs through motor gas and all this, and I want to cut across, starting with, I would have wanted to hear more, because the much concentration we have in fueling, if you look, the topic that we're having is AfriFueling. We are only fueling motor vehicles on the road. I would have had more details, exactly what Engineer Kenywa as IPRA would do to actually have, forget about the electricity alone, isolated for energy, for a preferential costing. As IPRA ever regarded even that heavy fuel oil, petroleum, diesel to run industries as a special zone to be considered, so that alongside that productivity and mobility, we are able to have what we call cheaper production. That's still part of fueling that. And then I quickly request another thing. We talked about hydrocarbons being extracted responsibly under CAN, and my question in this would be, deep down, of course, there has been in other forums where I have made noise about nationalizing our oil fields. But I'm doing a project which is terminating on top of a coal plant in the South African region. And the country that we are trying to energize is actually energy deficient. But here is coal, which is being extracted purely to cure tobacco. And the country has no power. And we are here talking about what Warren has mentioned, curiosity. It is true. We have a saying that you cannot discover islands if you have fear to lose the sight of the shoreline. And in the native folks where I come from, we say, if you have chosen to fetch a big river from a big river, don't count the many times the gourds are swept. Yeah. And here is a situation where actually we have to fetch from the big river. And the question is, all the coal seams that are seated in the Mui Basin, we cannot so cleverly talk about having what we call extraction of coal and make it, I don't know what, yeah, that one. So is it possible then we can responsibly, because that is the emphasis Warren was having, responsibility when doing something. Is it possible then, instead of over-reliance, because when that time comes, when that Polish name, when Michael talks about at one time we shall be shut from even importing the hydrocarbons, it is real. So when we are told there is no G to G anymore, and we have our Lokicha, and still we cannot extract it because we haven't brought in our refinery, what are we going to do? It's a crisis already. I want to stop there so that someone else can have a chance. Thanks.
Thank you, Jack. Another question, Engineer Humphrey.
Okay, good evening and thank you so much for the panel. Indeed, you've done a great work. And again, thank you to the organizers of this wonderful expo. We look forward to having many as such. Yeah, so my name is Engineer Humphrey Ndire from Coco Networks, where we imagine and deliver technology in the fastest growing cities in Africa. So in addition to probably some of the questions that have been asked, mine will be a little brief, first on the fossil fuel side, then second on the energy transition side. So on the fossil fuel side, we've seen a lot of macroeconomic challenges to the OMCs in the country, a lot of mergers, a lot of exits. And at the same time, we are talking about, enabling investors and the current marketers to be able to trade easily in our current economy. So I think this question goes out to Engineer Kinyua. Probably you can help us, and probably the entire panel help us elucidate on that. Then my second question is on the energy transition. Bringing in all these forms of renewable energy, so from autogas, bioethanol, where I come from, Coco Networks, EV, and all these spaces. But what are we doing as a country to make the playing field level and more or less make it easy to get into the market? So I'm talking of barriers to market entry and other macroeconomic challenges that are facing the AMCs are already here. So my questions are those on fossil fuels, the macroeconomic challenges that are facing the AMCs and what we can do about that. Then on the renewable side, on energy transition, on barriers to market entry, and how we are leveling the playing field. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Engineer Humphrey. I think I'll let Engineer Edward answer those questions, and then you can take the next round of questions.
Thank you for the questions. Yes, Jack, indeed, I'm no GW, but you wait to be commended. You don't commend yourself. Yeah, there's some bit of work we've done, especially on the aspect of anti-adulteration levy. I believe, we increased the taxes of kerosene to be the same level as those ones of diesel. Sometimes in 2019, kerosene was being used as an adulterant. The differential in pricing between diesel and kerosene was 18 shillings. And someone would get a liter of kerosene and put in diesel. You wouldn't know. But once you fuel your vehicle, within a few days your injector pump is gone. A lot of these transporters lost their injector pumps, and that thing is not cheap. So I think when we did that work, it earned me an OGW, but I was able to reduce the consumption of kerosene from 49 million liters per month to a paltry about 12 million liters a month. Today, as we speak, kerosene consumption is about 43 million liters a year. So you are using a whole ship to adulterate your diesel engine. So there's a lot of loss in government tax revenue, and we had to look for innovative ways of getting it out. But in terms of special tariffs for fuel for industrial use, This talks to the aspect of differentiated fuels. And when you have differentiated fuels with varying tariffs, you have to be very careful because that encourages a lot of black market work. Adulteration. India has tried having a model where they have LPG for domestic use vis-a-vis LPG for industrial use. One is subsidized, but the way we know this country, I think even as we introduce those ones, let's not create more problems, Jack, because we know what will happen. You'll find whatever you subsidized is all adding up in motorcycles and in people's vehicles. So when you do differentiation, you have to be very careful so that you're not encouraging one side of the black market. So you must have a fuel differentiation technology that works very perfectly. So that is something that can be looked at, and I believe for like thermal generation, those ones can probably qualify for a special tariff because that can be able to make the cost of power cheaper. But I think one of the steps government is doing, now you know that fuel oil in the next few months will be no longer be imported individually by companies, it will come through OTS. So we've added fuel oil, we've added bitumen, and we've added LPG to the list of products that will be imported through OTS. So when we do higher volumes, that brings the aspect of economies of scale, and basically that reduces the cost. So I think these are things we can explore, but we need to be careful so that we don't create a bigger problem. I think you've been doing your research on coal. I think it's a topic that is quite hot, but the fact of the matter, we are using about 7,000 tons of coal a day in Kenya. If you calculate that with a whole year, coal consumption is actually more than the gasoline you are using in your vehicles. And where is this coal being used? It's basically for cement production. A lot of these cement factories, they're using coal, and they're also for heating their kilns, producing power. Where is this coal coming from? Most of this coal is being imported from Tanzania and South Africa. And you've rightly said, we have massive resources at the Mui Basin. So I have not slept on the job, Jack. I have established a coal department. I know there's a lot of noise about transition, but we are silently using, it's like you're saying you don't eat ugali, but every day you hide and eat ugali. So the next day you say, I don't eat ugali. So this coal is being used. So we asked ourselves, how can we make it safe? In terms of handling that coal, we know the dangers of handling coal, especially for storage, transportation of that coal, and in terms of even the emissions that are coming from that coal. So we are basically doing a framework on the licensing of coal, and we're also doing a policy paper. We want to convince our principals there's no need of spending 40 billion importing coal, and we have resources lying idle. So that is a policy paper that we are basically doing so that we can convince our principals that there's merit in exploiting that coal and using clean coal technology, because that clean coal technology is available to be able to utilize that coal sustainably. We're just hiding our heads in the sand like the proverbial ostrich. If you go to the roads today, go to KRA, you'll find this coal that entered through Namanga. But because coal does not come through a pipeline, it comes through trucks. Sometimes people will tell you it's clinker, but they don't know what is inside. We have done our research. We did a benchmark study. We visited all the steel plants. We visited all the cement factories. And our guess is that we are using 7,000 tons of coal a single day. Multiply that by a whole year. So we better look for sustainable technologies to use that coal, get frameworks that will work for us, and utilize the resource we have. Otherwise, that resource will sit there Well, Tanzania is exporting most of our coal, and I am told our coal could be of higher quality than what we are getting. I end it up there. Now, the other issue is on, I think, Engineer Humphrey, you asked about the microeconomic challenges that are faced. Yes, we understand the industry during this age. I think things change very fast. You are price regulated in terms of the normal fuels, and also in terms of the other fuels. There are a lot of competing interests within the industry, and challenges, of course, come here once in a while. I believe one of the things we can work on, and this is what POAC has done best. I think initially POAC was fighting, they were doing shadow boxing. You could not see Akina Njogu, you could not see Martin, but you could hear some high-pitched voices coming from the crowd, complaining. I remember this one time, we stipulated the travel times for trucks. And that day is when I knew Mr. Martin Chomba. He was wearing a chain those days. And he stood and asked the PS. It's actually the CS who came. They went on a strike, and they blocked all the depots. I'm not saying it was POAC, but a lot of the small companies could not comprehend why that decision had been made. They blocked all the depots, and there was no fuel moving in, fuel moving out. Then we had a meeting with them, and Chomba asked the CS, now when you say you travel from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., what happens if my truck, 6 p.m. gets my truck at Weteidie? I had even to go and check that town called Weteidie. It's a very populated town. And I think we didn't have an answer. In fact, it's like we were creating more trouble, because if you say at dusk the vehicle has to park, where does it park? So that is when we told Martin and his group, don't shadow box, form an organization which you can come to the table and we discuss. Like now on the biofuel space, you could have your organization, or you can partner with POAC, and you have any issues, we can discuss them, and if they require the wider industry, then we can be able to address it with that on that perspective. We may not have an answer to everything. Sometimes we pretend to have answers, but we also go to research so that I give you a proper answer of the problem you have. But a problem shared is a problem solved. So once we discuss it and give ourselves timeline, you'll come with half the solution, I'll come with half the solution. And we are able to put something together that works for you. So those challenges, every business has challenges. If you go to guys in aviation, they will tell you their challenges are from here to Ghana. If you go to the guys in the fishing industry, the same thing. But I believe government sets policy and regulation. The industry knows what is best practice. It has to work together. We collaborate, and we'll be able to get something that will work for both you and me. I think today as we speak, I'm one of the happiest guys, because POAC is moving towards excellence. The noise that was there is gone. These guys were very tough. They used to come to my boardroom and bang tables. But today we speak like professionals on the same level. In fact, they challenge me in a lot of things. Actually, some of the things they are organizing like this one, can't you see the excellence in it? So we are happy when we move you to some good place. I think that talks also to creating a level playing field. I believe it's important, especially like for technologies like cocoa, for technologies like EVs, for technologies like autogas. Once we run a pilot and it's successful, and I believe now all these technologies have been tried and tested, can we do regulation? You know me, I'm like a prefect. When you tell me that these are our rules, so if I find Engineer Humphrey is breaking, I come for his neck. So for us, it's you to tell us, can we set the rules? And anybody going against those rules, then I know there's been a lot of complaint, especially in the autogas space. Now, when we told the autogas players, can we set the rules? We have formulated the regulations, and we have the standards. And I believe going forward, everybody will be working on a space that is well regulated, it's fair to everybody. Thank you.
We can have another 2 questions. Can start with the lady.
Hello everyone, my name is Sarah. I come from a company called EcoHub Services Limited. I'm an environmental health and safety and sustainability lead. I so happen to also be the Society of Petroleum Engineers representative in Kenya. So a little bit biased in the oil and gas sector because there is a lot of potential that is lying within Africa. Kenya is moving at a very fast pace, clearly, because we have a lot of renewables that have developed and all that, which is good. My question goes to Michael, as well as Engineer Edward Kinyua. So we have a lot of innovations happening in the country right now, that is in Kenya, the geothermal sector, as well as the LPG. And we understand that these sectors, they pose a lot of safety risks, considering when we use autogas, the pressurized tanks. We've had explosions happening in the country. The recent one that happened in Kariobangi and killed several people. So as we are transgressing into accepting the renewables, energies and all that, how are we transitioning in the safety space, Michael, as well as Edward, how are we transitioning in terms of our policies, in our legal frameworks, in ensuring that the safety standards are met? Thank you.
Maybe one more question and then you can.
Okay, good evening. My name is Dennis. Actually, mine is a comment that we discussed with one engineer, Edward, and some guys we were having lunch there. I told them that there is a technology in South Korea that they came into pilot phase in 2010. They were doing a research on a device that was used on pre-combustion, before combustion of the fossil fuels. And this device made a very big milestone. It was tested in Philippines, South Korea, China, and India. And this device was later improved using quantum physics. And actually, I have it here. I can show you. It's here.
Excuse me, maybe we can take that maybe later.
Okay,
if
okay.
it's okay. We are just taking questions for now.
Okay, okay. Okay, I just wanted to say, because people were scared of the fossil fuels going away from us, I wanted to say that we have the technology.
Thank you, thank you. The next question, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Ruben Amwakwa, and I'm from Ghana. So I'm a chemical engineer by profession, so I sort of got where Warren was coming from. Indeed, engineers have very curious minds. I found myself dabbling in finance at some point, and quite recently also in the direction of AI and tech. So I align with what you were saying. Now my question is mainly to Michael. So like I said, back in Ghana, I know what you're trying to do with auto gas, in the auto gas space, which is very commendable with the efforts that you are undertaking. We have quite a thriving auto gas industry, or just auto gas space sector. In fact, we're doing on monthly about 35 KT per month LPG consumption. And for every LPG that is consumed in the retail outlet, you have about 30%, which is auto gas. We have a peculiar structure in terms of how we consume the LPG. So unlike in Kenya, where you have the refilling and exchange model, we refill the cylinders at a retail outlet. So if, say, person A runs out of gas, he can just carry his canister, go to the retail outlet, and for whatever amount he wants to purchase, he just places the amount request, and then he is refilled for them. And that same spot is where the auto gas vehicles also come in to refill. We are in the process of adapting the cylinder exchange model. There's been a strong push from industry players because they've been used to our model, and there's a bit of pushback. But the exchange model has been implemented, and we're running the two side by side. Now, the question I have for you, and maybe it might also move to Engineer Edward, is you are looking at how you can expand the auto gas industry in Kenya. Well, maybe it's not a question, it's more of a suggestion. Could it be that you look at how regulation can help in terms of subsidizing the price of LPG for you in order to help with the penetration, and also even support the installation kits as well? Because for most people who don't adopt, it is an issue of education and understanding of the whole idea of having to introduce some new element into their vehicles. Because one of the challenges we face, we don't have a well-structured, and I was really impressed with the work you're doing here in Kenya. We don't have a fully established automation center or a formalized one. You have all of these individual mechanics who, by one way or the other, are able to do installations, and that's how most of the vehicles. So if you have most of the vehicles, they are either vehicles that already have gas systems installed from home, or these wayside mechanics just install the kits in the vehicles, and most of the times it's not safe. So it's about what regulation can, how regulation can come in to support what you are doing in order to also help educate people. And I believe that is the best way you can help LPG penetration, auto gas penetration. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. Sure, I'll go ahead. Sarah, right? Sarah and the gentleman's name? Ruben. Yeah, thank you very much for those questions. Very fair points. I think I really want to dig in very deeply on the topic raised on the safety of LPG. I think it's one of my works that I do is myth busting. There's a lot of myths around in the industry on LPG, so I would just want to unpack that and just break it down. So first of all, everybody has to understand that LPG is a high combustible energy source. So it is, we developing safety measures in Europe, well, luckily we had about 20 to 30 years of developing the safety measures. Now, the LPG is not, the automotive LPG consists of various different elements into the ecosystem. So we have, on one side, we have the automotive LPG systems. These are the systems that are being installed into the vehicles. So that's one area, and I'll say a few words on that. But then you have the whole LPG handling business. So that is importation, that is depots, distribution, and then all the way transportation with the bobtails all the way down to the last mile refueling station. So there's definitely a lot of work that we need to do together with the likes of EPRA, and not only, really, we cannot rely only on EPRA helping us in building the policies for the safeties. We, in many ways, and this is something that John Jogo has been trying to do for quite a long time, is to unify everybody in the LPG space and create what we wanted to call an autogas alliance. And I think that project is still well underway. I think it's just a matter of time to get everybody unified and then self-regulate and make sure that everybody understands what are the standards that we need to always implement. Obviously, we live in Africa, and there's so many different ways of doing many different things, but we opted from the very beginning is not to reinvent the wheel and to absolutely adopt in 100% tried and tested methods from Eastern Europe. Now, the LPG systems that we install into the cars, those have been crash tested in European standards. Now, this may shock you. I need to tell everybody that LPG systems right now in cars is safer than petrol and diesel. And I'll tell you why. Not because of the fuel itself. It's because how we handle the fuel within the car. First of all, we have a tank, and we have to make sure that we rely on the right specifications of those tanks. It's very, very important. We have a multi-valve that releases the pressure if there ever is a pressure in the tank, and that's very, very important. So what will happen is, let's say you have a high collision crash with an LPG car on Nakuru Highway. One is an LPG car, but there's a but, because he also has a petrol tank. So that's very, very important to remember that. And then there's another car which is just petrol tank. For argument's sake, high crash collision, what will happen? Let's say the car running on LPG, its fuel tank was only 5%, very small amount. The car that was running on petrol has, let's say, 50% filled up tank. What will happen is the tank of the petrol will rupture, and if there's any fire, it will lit it up. It's never ever going to happen with an LPG car. It's not going to happen. There's no way. Ruben, you mentioned, and I'm really, really curious, because I really need to see the cars that you have, or the mobiles that you have in Ghana running on cylinders. For us, that's a no-go. No-go. The only way to make sure that we have a safe handling of the LPG within the car is a very robust and highly well-designed multi-valve. That's the most important element. If you don't have that, you're running into troubles. So I'm really curious to know what kind of solutions. So I'll be happy to sit down with you and just to understand what kind of vehicles you have in Ghana that run. But to my mind, what you're saying, it sounds very, very unsafe. It sounds very, well, not fully regulated. And we quite lucky in Kenya in the sense that we had EPRA from the beginning very open-minded about these technologies. Of course, it took time, right? I assume you had many, many meetings with Mzee Janusz, and there's been a lot of back and forth going on, and what can be done, how can it be done. But the LPGs, because the fear of LPG being in cars in Europe was so high, all the manufacturers of these systems made it sure that they self-regulate and they actually crash cost every single potential option. But now, what you hear from time to time is probably a bobtail crashed. I don't know, different ways. There's been quite a lot of incidents in the last, I would say, 3 years, but not too many, that's to be honest. But if there's one area that we definitely need to make, I would say, better strides, is to try to see if we can build better LPG handling solutions when it comes to refueling, filling tanks, and so forth. Yeah, those things happen. From our side, when we're looking just from the automotive, we are very, very well tried and tested in terms of safety. So I think that's testament enough to move forward. Maybe I will pass it over to Engineer Edward on the LPG handling, but I think there's definitely a lot of standards to be introduced,
But to my mind, I think it's all in the process. It's all developing. New ideas are coming in. Better, bobtails have to also be checked and have to have the right pumping systems and everything, making sure that it's all in place. So yeah, that one I can't answer because that's just out of my expertise.
Thank you. I'll add to the questions, and I think I'll start with the one that Sarah asked. And I believe you are talking about safety in the industry. We've had not very good record last 2 years, 24 months. You all know what happened on the 1st of February last year. But of course, we are mandated to surveil even when people are operating in sites that are not licensed. But of course, that site was not licensed. But one of the things we're emphasizing on is the fact that every project that you do, whether it's a petroleum project, whether it's an LPG project, whether it's an energy project, you must do an ESIA. And that ESIA has to go to NEMA. And once NEMA gets the ESIA reports, one report comes to us. So NEMA can never give you a license, an ESIA license, Environmental Social Impact Assessment license, without getting comments from ourselves. The challenge we've had, and I think this one I'll challenge the ESIA experts, Sarah, you included, we have a problem. We have people who have not had experience in the oil and gas sector who are purporting to do ESIAs for oil and gas sector. And in fact, the issue is so serious because when I look at the investors sitting here in this room, them they don't understand. As long as you have a NEMA license, they think you can be able to handle. Even when you go to the medicine profession, I'm sure there's a doctor who specializes with hearts, there's a doctor who specializes with the nervous system. So ESIA experts are the same. So what we are doing, we are working with NEMA to have like a short list of people who have experience in oil and gas. And this we are doing ESIA experts who have proven track record in oil and gas projects, so that they'll be the only ones that will be allowed to do ESIAs for oil and gas projects. We have experienced a very bad scenario where last year, when the PS told you that we had a pilot for 20 schools for LPG for schools, and I told you schools are very sensitive areas. The guys just sit in the office and replicate a report. They tell you, oh, I've done a design, a preliminary design, the safety distances are ABCD. But when that report comes to us and we go to site, we find there's a dormitory there, there's a kitchen there. So it was a theoretical ESIA. So we end up rejecting it. And a lot of investors here ask, why does the ESIA take too long to be approved? It's because the people we used in the first place were not experts. Because me as a profession, I need to tell you the truth. When you take me to your site, whether it is money you are paying me, sometimes professional ethics dictate that I tell you this site cannot be appropriate for the kind of project that you want. I know, sorry Njogu, I'll keep on using you. Your people are investors. When they identify a good spot where to do a project, then they think about market first. But me, when I come there as a regulator, as an engineer, I think, is there a flat in the neighborhood? What will that child do when there's leakage of gas? Because that child could be like my own child. And I don't want to have blood on my hands when an accident happens. So you may have paid too much for that site, because sometimes you guys go ahead and purchase. But sometimes we look you in the eye and you tell you, no, Jogu, you are my friend, I cannot do it. So it is good, even when you are buying land or leasing land, please get an expert. Engineer Mwangi was here, he's an expert. There are many more experts. Ask him, what's your opinion, engineer, of this site? Can we do an auto gas project here? He will tell you no, and that now makes you not commit yourself. But because you, the seller will always tell you, kuna mtu mwingine wanting to buy, so you want to pay a deposit. So those are the problems and that's why we want to at least help the industry, shortlist the people. And this we are doing especially for LPG for schools. Once those reports are done, we want them to come, we clear them as fast as possible. We have the designs which are very clear to everybody, and we are able to progress the projects. In terms of what Ruben asked, Ruben, I think we've always encouraged investment, but I think we've seen one of the weakest points, especially for the auto gas industry, is the aspect of conversions. People are doing stations. There are so many stations being done today, but the speed of conversion, and I think Janusz, you can attest to this, the speed of conversion is not commensurate with the level of infrastructure in terms of refueling sites coming on board. So there's a lot of competition, undercutting in prices. What we are encouraging investors to do is now to convert more. However, I think the technology that is being used by Janusz and others, the ones we've seen, is a very superior technology. I am very fearful, and this is something that we need to control, not to get counterfeits into this industry. And counterfeits here, in terms of the conversion kits. You know, in this country, sometimes consumers are pocket driven. So when you tell him this banner costs 200 bob, and there's another banner that costs 600 bob, they go for the 200 bob one. Not knowing this banner is the one that will kill your children when it malfunctions. So the auto industry, because we are also transporting passengers, I think it's something we need to work very closely with the Kenya Bureau of Standards to make sure that anybody who is bringing kits to this country, I think we've been using Stag kits which are superior. And I've talked to my counterparts in Algeria, Sonatrach, they were here. They told me they use the Stag kits. They have 52 conversion centers, 52. I don't know how many conversion centers we have here. There are less than 10, maybe, Janusz. 3. And we are talking of a country with 52 conversion centers. They have even domesticated local content, making of kits. Stag has allowed them to assemble those kits inland. 2 million converted cars. So the opportunities are big. Thank you.
I think we'll end at that. I want to really appreciate Warren for, I know he had a hard stop at 3 p.m., but he was available until almost 6 p.m. Michael for taking us through a masterclass on LPG. Ken, I know you're extremely busy, but you've made it here literally the whole day to be available for this particular conversation. And the engineer for, I think there's nobody else who understands oil and gas like Edward. And he's graciously provided the answers that we wanted and we had, for the questions that we had, and we really appreciate you for that. I want you to stand up, and then we can, give them a standing ovation, a clap. I also want to thank you for being patient with us. I know it's been a long day. We started a bit late, but you've been here until the end. We encourage you to walk around the booths, look at the providers who graciously have taken up space to show us different products and services. And we encourage you to also come for the sessions tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll be moderating in the morning and in the afternoon. We are talking about technology in fueling, and we're also talking about sustainability. Thank you and have a nice evening. See you tomorrow and enjoy yourselves. Thank you.